Okay, it looks like we are officially recording. So, hello, my name is Thomas Decker. I am a high school English teacher right now over at Quinter High School. Yeah, that's what I do. So, we'll go that direction.
All right.
It's over there for me.
My name is Anna Draper. I'm teaching orchestra in Dodge City. I teach at the middle school and the high school.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
I don't know who's down.
I'll say on my screen, I'm up from you. I'll go. Patrick Doyle. I teach all of the strength and conditioning classes at Riverton High School and Riverton Middle School.
I bet you're busy then.
Yeah, I'm real busy.
And I'm Mallory Diederich. I teach juniors and seniors math at Seaman High School, which is in Topeka, Kansas. So very busy as well.
Yeah, especially with the surgeries and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
So, as far as I can tell, one of the things that we need to talk about is, after going through the reading and watching the videos and everything else, there's a lot of potential for trauma as well as methods that go into managing and dealing with kids that are going through it. So we have a couple of questions that I think we should just have some open discussion about. The first one is, what does safety look like to you? What do you think safety means as far as safety in the classroom, safety in the city? Any takers?
Yeah, I was like, you want to go open forum?
Yeah, let's go open forum.
All right. So obviously, weight room safety is a big portion of what I do on a regular basis, each and every day in the classroom. Obviously, not traditional classroom. So just making sure that each kid, since there's 20 of them in here, I can't be doing the safety for every single kid at the same time. So teaching kids proper safety practices before you even start doing something is more important. So nobody gets hurt, obviously, is the main concern. And then like on a school scale, I think it's, making sure all the teachers are on the same practices when it comes to crisis drills and all this type of stuff, fire, tornado, all the same drills, and make sure teachers are briefed on what to do in every different situation.
Do you ever try to get the kids to apply the safety things you're teaching them about weights, respecting other people's space and making sure that they have the right clearance and everything else, and you're not standing behind someone who's just going to chuck a barbell over their head?
I was gonna say, I talk about it on a daily basis, but that doesn't mean they're listening. Because they still do it on a daily basis. And so it's just, you have to just reiterate the fact almost daily until, it takes 21 days to create a habit, right? So you're gonna have to tell a kid 21 times not to do something before they finally don't do it.
Sure.
Is kind of the way I look at things.
I think for just, in a math classroom, safety, like physical safety, is not something that is near as important. It's not something that needs to be stressed. But kind of like what Patrick said, that, making sure teachers are informed on, our crisis drills, which I know we have to do at least one a month, whatever those might be, if they're fire, tornado, active school shooting, all of those kind of things, lockdown drills. But I also think it applies to just like safety in a classroom is like a feeling that you can provide for students, like a safe space for students. And I know relationships are stressed a lot in teaching, and that's something I think we all try to do, is build relationships with students. And it's one of those things that, can you create a safe space in your classroom that you're not going to get all your kids. Like, I have 120 kids. Like, I'm not going to reach every single one of them, and not every single one of them is going to want to think of me as an adult that they can come to and talk to. But if I can get 85% of them, those are pretty good odds to know that my place is a safe place to be, whether that be just they need to come and hang out, cool down, get someone to talk to, whatever those things are. I think that's also what safety implies as well.
Absolutely. And those relationships that you start to get out of setting up your classroom or weight room or anything else, that it's like, this is my bubble. I can put this place inside of my bubble. I can feel good here.
Yeah.
Definitely starts to come into effect as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think something that I'm working on with my students right now, I have an incoming class of sixth graders. So every year, this new group of sixth graders comes in, and I'm going to have them through high school and through their senior years in theory, if they stick with their orchestra program. And so I need to create a place in my classroom. I don't get rid of them at the end of the year or anything anymore. I mean, last year, yeah, no,
Yeah. Well,
Um,
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So one of the things I'm working on is just developing not just that relationship. I mean, yes, to create a safe place where they feel like they can come to me and, ask things, but among themselves as well, that when we're engaging in things where, they're performing for each other, they're playing for each other, they're evaluating each other on the spot. Those can be stressful things for anybody. So it's really important that I make sure that everybody's clear that, mistakes are learning opportunities, and that our goal is to identify those mistakes and correct them collectively, not like accuse someone of making a mistake, because we're all like, that's the whole point of the whole point, is to make mistakes so we can get better. And so creating that safe space has been a challenge. But
Well, one thing that I would say is like Mallory talked about, like you have 11th and 12th graders and that's it, right? Is that what you said?
I have sophomores and juniors. Yeah.
Okay, sophomores and juniors.
Yeah.
Whereas Anna was like, well, 6th through 12th grade, so you're going to have them for a lot longer.
Yeah.
And so like those are not necessarily the other space doesn't need to be safe, but like that's a long period of time that kids are going to be with the same kids every year, ideally.
Right.
And, and kind of like me, like I have kids 7th through 12th grade, and so they're going to be with the same kids in the same room doing. So if you don't set the tone early, if you don't set it early, then they might struggle, and that's what's going to deter them from keeping up with it, I guess.
Well, and I agree wholeheartedly with setting it early. I have 9 through 12 English, and I'm the only teacher that touches or sees each one of the students throughout the day, that touches each one of the student careers that happens here. Because of electives and everything else, some of the classes are here, some of them are there. We have more than one math teacher, but I'm the only English. So I'm the only one that really has the opportunity to come in contact with every single student every single day. Mm-hmm. And so it puts a weird kind of pressure on my classroom to be the one that draws the cultural references, that draws the personal safety and the emotional, the social and emotional safety aspects. English, right? Like nobody strains themselves opening a book. We got big books, but I'm more likely to cause a headache than I am to cause strain.
Yeah.
So it very much changes the perspective of how to approach the students.
Can you guys hear that music, or is that too loud?
No, it barely. It's just kind of in the background occasionally. It's not a thing.
Boys' locker room getting ready for the football game.
Oh, yeah. No.
So if it gets too loud, I'll go yell at him.
Oh, no worries.
Or I can move.
So does your school currently have any sort of safety measures in place or any sort of hierarchy where it's like, okay, I'm worried about this kid because of these things?
Okay, go.
My school, because mine's a big school, so we're a 5A school, and there's 1,200 students in our building. So there is definitely a hierarchy of things to go about, because it's not like there's not a lot of teachers, like there's not a lot of turnover, right. Like where you have every single eighth or every kid for English. Like my math department, there's 8 of us in just the 9 or the 10 through 12. So there's actually, I think there's 11 or 12 math teachers in the building. So there's lots of like overall. So like ours goes, it kind of depends on like immediate threat. And I've had to deal with this a couple times this year with, like if someone is struggling. So usually it's contacting one of the counselors. We have 3 counselors that are split up by alphabet. So contacting them by importance, being like, hey, have you heard anything from them? No. We have 2 social workers in the building. So that's another kind of
Oh, that's
place
good.
there. Yeah, it is.
That's a nice thing to have.
And then it can go all the way up, and we have our administration too, which we have 5 in administration up in our building as well. So it kind of goes into those levels there of you're going into the places where like they're split for the kids, like because
Right.
if it's a last name of like me, like Diederich with D, like I would go get a hold of the counselor who has the last name is D and get a hold of them and go from there. So ours is it's not super structured, but it's definitely a lot more like it kind of, you do kind of an outline of do these kind of things if we have someone struggling with any number, just because it's such a large operation that
Right.
kids can easily fall through the cracks with such a large amount going on.
No, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Sorry, that music was annoying me. I had to leave.
Gotcha.
So I would say like the only difference is like if I'm in a small high school, so it's like 2A. So we have one counselor, whereas we have 220 kids in the high school. It's going to be different than a school that has, what do you guys have, over 1,000?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like kids can get lost in the mix a little bit more than when they're. I mean, we have like 4 hallways here that kids can go down, and so like every teacher sees every kid every minute of the day, and so it's a little bit, ow, and so it's a little bit different. But I think like the more tools you guys can have, like for the more students, like it's gonna help them out the most.
My district is working on adapting like a social emotional curriculum right now. And so last year was my first year here, and I was teaching elementary music. And we did a lot of, actually through several, not just through my school, but through other things. We did ACEs, a lot about trauma informed, which isn't necessarily like, immediate and awful traumas, but like the ACEs stuff, according to the CDC website, about 2/3 of the population scores on the ACEs. So it's not just like something that is a few, it's pretty prevalent. And so we just kind of went through some training for that, and they've adapted or adopted zones of regulation, which basically you identify the colors of how you feel. So this year in the middle school and high school, as a new teacher, it's hard to know what's really new and what's something that's been there for a while. So,
right. It's new to you, right? It's like buying the used car.
Everything is new. But anyway, it is new. And they're working really hard in the professional development this year to implement the zones of regulation across the whole district so that those kids in elementary school are learning the techniques to control or to work with, just to evaluate how they're feeling and what they can do to sort of minimize those feelings, which sort of goes in line with the interventions for the ACEs. I mean, just the trauma sensitive. What steps can you take to address trauma sensitivity?
Our school, from the sound of it, I think our school is the smaller of the 4 that are represented here. I'm not sure though. We have about 68 students in the high school. Yeah, it's tiny. When you say 8-man and you look at the high school and realize we don't have a defense and offense. We have the team.
Yeah.
It makes you think for a minute. It is shocking to me how many students we have that are under watch or advisory. We have 2 post-suicides in the school, which, I mean, that's a 30th of the student body, which sounds really small until you realize that, I mean, it's 17-year-olds and under that have attempted something really dramatic. We have self-harm. We have one student who I have to applaud him. He has a lot of social emotional issues that he very much self-regulates, where if it becomes a thing, he's like, I need to step out for myself for a minute. And he goes and he helps and he centers himself is the best way I can put it, and helps to kind of purge whatever negative thing is starting to build up. And then he comes back in and he's fine. but he will isolate himself intentionally with no issue. Like, no, health moment, I'll be right back. And has been capable of managing himself well enough that he doesn't have to have like the heavier medications that he did whenever he was in younger grades, which is really impressive to me. Like, dude, we only have 68 kids. Like, eventually something else has to be going on here, or it's a bigger issue than you ever expected.
But at least he's probably 1 out of 1,000 kids that can self-regulate it like that.
I'm really
Maybe
impressed
1,000
with them. Like, everyone at one point was like, I was worried that it'd make him a target. And everyone else in the school is like, nope, he's having a moment. Let him have his moment. He'll handle it. He'll come back. And him leaving and coming back is just completely natural to him in the culture in the school, which is one of those moments where I think being so small is really healthy.
Yeah.
Because it's like, he's the one that lives down the street. You've known him his entire life. He goes to church. You see him at the restaurants. You see him at the grocery store. He's the one with the video game that you're wanting to borrow on the weekend. And so everybody knows him. And so it kind of helps where it's like, it's just him. It's okay.
Yeah.
Versus the 1,000 student population where it's like, oh, okay, you're the weirdo.
Yep.
And you become the title instead of the name with the title. Moving on to the next thing is kind of a personal take, and obviously not trying to push anyone into mentioning their own personal stuff. Have you experienced any trauma things in your school, either personally or professionally?
I mean, like at our school, we're in like the southeast corner of Kansas. It's pretty low socioeconomic. Like there's 3 high schools within 5 miles of each other that are all pretty much the exact same size. And so, but everybody comes from like the same background pretty much. Like you look at those, like the 7 ACE categories or whatever, I was looking at them. I was like, we pretty much have every single one of those on a daily basis that you hear that kids are going through. Mm-hmm. I mean, from the only shower that kids get is going in the locker room, or they don't have clothes to change out of for PE classes, or they can't afford a backpack to carry. Like, I mean, it's just like kids either their parents are dead, they're out of the house, they're divorced, they live with their grandparents. Like a majority of our kids is something different like that you hear about every single day. And I mean, I think that's just the area of the state that we live in, is all 3 schools are kind of like that.
That's rough.
Yeah,
it's rough to deal with, and it's rough to see the kids going through it. It's because they didn't sign up for any of it.
Well, and it's like you want to help them, but it's like some of that is like beyond your power as a teacher. Like most of it is outside of the school, and it's just, I mean, help them as much as you want in school, but they got to go home at some point, and they're coming back the next day. And sometimes it gets worse, sometimes it gets better. And like they talk about in the video where it talks about like the overactivation of like that fight or flight thing, where you're going to sleep every night in that flight stage, and you're just, I mean, you basically just get deeper and deeper and deeper, and then you're 24/7. You're just, that's kind of the way you are.
Yeah. And then you stop even expecting it to be any different afterwards, just because, like, why would today be any different?
Yeah.
Well, like when
have a shot at leaving it behind, it doesn't happen.
Yeah, and like my expectations are like super high for my students, and I don't think any of them have had anything expected of them ever. And so I don't, so it just blows my mind sometimes. Like their expectations for themselves are like a third of what I have for them. And so like, I think most of them just shut down immediately when they are expected to do anything more than what they've expected to do their entire life.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the thing that I fight on a daily basis.
So in the video, she talks about the number of students that were coming to her with like ADHD diagnosis, like all these kids that were getting sent to her, and that she finally established that this is not what they were, what the behaviors were not from these things, they were from something else. I think that that's the way that, you know, I most often notice this in my experiences. I mean, I don't know what my students would score on an ACE score. I don't know what my fellow teachers would score on an ACE score. I know that it's likely that we all fall in that score somewhere. But just remembering that when there's a behavior, she says in there not to put names on students, like that's a bad kid, not to accuse them sort of just being there, but rather to say why, you know, like, why is this happening? What has caused
Right.
this to happen for you? And I feel like as I'm working with students, that's always in the back of my mind, like, you know, okay, I have this kid who's acting out. I have a kid that really needs something, medication. I don't know what it is, you know. Last year I had a kid that was throwing shoes across my classroom. It was lots of fun. And it was really stressful for me. You know, I mean, it was like literally every single day, his classroom teacher was removing the entire class from the classroom because he was like throwing stuff. And he had to be, you know, that you can't move the kid because you can't touch him. So you have
Right.
to keep everyone else out. And so it also happened to be my daughter's class. So it was really like traumatic for me on many fronts.
I bet that's
but,
tough.
but, you know, just remembering like that it's not just his fault. I mean, sure, we all need some accountability, but there are lots of other things that go behind that, and how are we going to help them? And she provides the self-regulation, I guess I wrote down holistic interventions, because everything she talked about had to do with, you know, how you lived your life at home, and the interventions being things that were more about like home life structured things.
Right.
But I wanted to share a few resources that I jotted down. Some of them are things that were shared with me at my school that have sort of shaped my thinking about trauma informed and teaching with students who have a lot of background. I mean,
Right. A lot of background, just period.
One of them is Help for Billy. And Help for Billy is about comparing two boys, one who has had sort of a normal upbringing as young children, and the other who would fall in this category of being born in a stressful situation where literally in the womb, you know, the stress hormone was present. So there was an actual, like potentially an actual impact on his brain development. And so it sort of compares these two children and how they respond and react throughout this course of their education. And it would be like a lot of the kids that we see that have behaviors and that we don't know what they're from. I think that a lot of times when you get to middle school and high school, you don't see those as often because they've been addressed at a younger age. For me, last year working with first grade, that's sort of the age that they can first start diagnosing things. And so you see all the behaviors, but you don't have the interventions yet because nobody really knows if it's just a developmental thing or if it's actually something that needs to be addressed.
Right.
Anyway, that was a book that I thought was really interesting about that. The CDC has a whole write-up of this ACE study. It's the CDC Kaiser ACE study, and it has like all the statistics and things. So if you're interested in that, it's written up there. The other one that I've come across is traumasensitiveschools.org. Sort of just explains what other schools are doing or what it means to be a trauma-informed school, which I had to look up because I kept hearing trauma-informed and I didn't really know what exactly it meant because it seemed like nobody's ever defining it. We just say it exists and we talk about some things, but like, what does it mean to be trauma? And what are we actually doing to address this stuff? We are, and we're trying to do stuff, but it wasn't very clear. And then the last one that I found is I was curious about how, well, this one is called Parenting with ACEs. So in other words, adults, teachers, adults who are scored on ACE. It talks about how there have been studies done in animals that have demonstrated that it's actually a passed down gene, that if you have this if you were born in a stressful situation, if toxic stress was something as a child before the age of 18 that had developed for you, that can actually, there's research that indicates that it could be passed down to your children. I thought that was interesting. It doesn't confirm in humans, but anyway, this article goes on and talks about how it can affect you in the long term, in generations to come, and working to break that cycle.
Right.
I thought that was helpful, like for practical ways that you can apply things or just be aware of how to apply them in your classroom or at home with your children, I guess. And the last one was just the effects of toxic stress on the brain and body at, I don't know, ksigmund.com. I guess I can type those up in our document tonight if
Okay.
you want 'em.
That would
But
be
it
lovely
basically
if you
talks
could.
about in general how adults can deal with toxic stress, because that's something that we can experience as well. But yeah.
Those are great resources, and that ACE stuff is so fascinating. Like, I didn't know anything about it until like last year. I think we had a PD on some stuff where the last school that I was at last year, they were like working on developing a social emotional curriculum, and so they had talked a lot about the ACE, and so I had done a lot of research there. It's crazy how that works and everything that impacts. As for like something personal like that, like it has always affected kind of like how I view a lot of things. So I graduated from Seaman High School and then was in college, and my mom she's the principal at Seaman Middle School, so I grew up in education. My dad was our police officer for the district, and when I was in college actually committed suicide. So, and was working for the school. So there was a lot of things, one, that affect, like my brother was still in high school. So like I got to see like how our school handles like a crisis, like one losing a faculty member, but also losing, like a student's family member and how that impacts. And like all of those things like really drove me into the field of education anyways. But because it's also something that like everybody in our district knows. Like we are a bigger district, but it is like still like a small town feel to it. And so a majority of my kids like know my background, which gives me like an ability to like have another way to connect with my kids and have those relationships with kids who are struggling, with depression or suicidal thoughts or all those things. And I've had, even just this year, a couple of things that I've had to deal with that, are just a different level of that kind of trauma-informed care there. But it's been, because it's like affected my family the way it has, it's been something that like I have like really focused on. Of suicide prevention is really important to me, and it's something that I think it's talked about in my classroom all the time. It's talked about in our school all the time now. And so and because we kind of we're not as low socioeconomic as but it's kind of that middle class, those social problems that we see in the middle class so much, which is a lot of suicide, a lot of drug use, those kind of things, like prescription drug use, huge issues with vaping and those kind of things. Like those middle class problems is like what we have all the time in our school. And so I think just being like experiencing that myself is now something that I can help my students out with as well. But I think you were saying something, Anna was saying something about just not knowing like what our kids, and like I think Patrick said something about like shower and stuff. Like I have food in my room all the time, like because you just don't know when kids like don't have those, like when the last time they ate, and like it's in a drawer that's like kids know where it's at and they don't have to ask. Like they just go get something, if it's just a granola bar or crackers or something. But it's just like you can't learn if you're hungry. Like, and those are just things that I think in education we need to address. And if you do address, like you have a greater chance of creating those connections with the kids, but also like being able to teach too. Like those little things, if you can help with those little things, like I think it can go a long way in your classroom as well.
There are two things that I want to relate back to what you just said. One is the food. I have a girl who is very allergic to peanuts. Mm-hmm. And my wife, I don't think has met but about 2 or 3 of the students because of how far we live.
Yeah.
And, but she's a PA and she remembers things like that. And so if she goes to the store and it's like, oh, it's Halloween candy, she'll just buy Halloween candy for the school. Mm-hmm. And be like, okay, so here's some treats. But she always remembers to get something that has not even been processed around peanuts. Mm-hmm. So that one girl has this, and to date, no other teacher has remembered that she has a peanut allergy.
Yeah.
My wife remembers.
I was like, your wife that's never met anybody.
Yeah, exactly. And she's like, no, you have a peanut allergy. She can't be having like, you know,
Racist.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
this bag is just chewy candies like Starburst and stuff like that and Twix.
Yeah.
And that make sure that you don't open this bag until she's in the room. And all this, and the girls, she doesn't usually care, but she's like, it's the nicest damn thing anybody's done for me. I'm like, don't cuss, but you're welcome. And the other thing is, I had a weird childhood. To be honest, it was one of those, like, we didn't realize we were poor until after, you know, kind of moments. I didn't realize how messed up it was until somebody asked me questions. And it was like, oh, that explains the need for counseling.
I don't mean to, I think that's often the way I
Yeah,
think that's often the way it is. And we need to be sympathetic to our students, but also, you know, like,
To our fellow educators too. Like that's part of it though.
absolutely. Well, and some of the teachers are like, how have you gotten this relationship, this rapport so quickly with the student? I'm like,
relatable.
I remember what it was like. So I'm like, okay, you know, take an extra couple of days, decompress, deal with your stuff, come back when you're ready. And, you know, it's a paper. Like, oh, yeah, the grade, I get it. The grade, all hail the mighty grade. But I need you healthy first. We'll handle this later. Worry about that. And oftentimes I have found that that same student comes back and on at least one test in particular, I basically gave the same test back to back and with different questions. Same kind of setup, all that, to see if it was the testing was the issue or what was going on. And
All right.
you're fine.
My ice is leaking. I'll be right back.
Oh, okay. But the same, that student in a stressed versus non-stressed environment was 10 points different. They went from a C to almost an A. And so it was like, my kids do better because of the fact that I treat them a little bit more like a human being versus just a student with a title.
Yeah.
Now, I did that because it was the teachers around me. This is a really powerfully driven environment that's very pro-student, but it's easy to forget that in a lot of different scenarios and situations. I want to help her, but there's literally no way in which to go be like,
I'm here.
I'm sorry. I want to help you and grab the ice. And there's no way to do that.
It's fine. I made it back. We're fine, guys.
At least you get,
I'm sitting here. I'm like, I'm getting like really wet all of a sudden. Like it just happened all of a sudden. I was like, oh my God, it's everywhere. So
at least you get the good crutches instead of the ones from the 1970s.
No joke.
I bought them. They were only
that's why.
$50 online.
That's
And
why.
the normal ones are 25. I was like, those 25 extra bucks have been the best thing that I could have ever done.
The online is amazing. And
Amazon.
yeah,
Amazon's where
there's
it's
a
at.
reason why they're one of the only trillion-dollar companies in the world. Bezos owns us. Anyways.
Yeah, his wife owns him now.
So, honestly, we didn't have that many questions as much as we had fairly deep ones. So were there any other comments or anything else that you wanted to attach back to what we were talking about? Any final thoughts?
I wish like all educators were like you three. You guys get it, right? I
Yeah.
wish all my like fellow educators, like it amazes me the ones that just like don't get it. Like what you said, like you know, they're almost like jealous that you have like rapport with your students. And I'm like, it's not a competition. Like
It's not that hard either.
it's not
It
like
really
I'm trying
isn't.
to win everybody over. It's not like I'm trying, like if you're not in this for the students, then what are you doing it for? And I think one that's different about transition to teachers, like this is something that like we really do want to do, and we want to be there for kids and help out kids.
Well, in the life experience to have gone through something else before doing this, I think is massively valuable. you know, the teacher that has been a teacher their entire lives, you have so much experience doing this. Do you realize how big your blind spot is, though?
Yeah.
Because you didn't work the grocery store in the last 10 years.
Yep.
Well, and the one thing that I would add is like being like, I'm only 27, so I'm only 10 years older than some of these kids.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of them still see me as like, not like their age, but they can get away with more, or I'm more relatable than like their 60-year-old math teacher or whatever. I think they take advantage of that type of stuff is when like they have a younger teacher. But then again, I am able to build rapport with them better because I know what they're going through more than what the other teachers did when they were younger.
Mm-hmm.
My students don't know what to make of me. I look like I'm 55, but I have since I was 25, so nobody knows what the hell.
Well, I was like, I get mistaken for like 35 or 40 all the time, but that's because I can grow a massive beard and that's about it.
Yeah, like I left.
It's okay. A sub the other day thought I was a student, so you know.
See?
I was like walking down the hall, and the sub was just like, "Where are you going?" And I was like, "To the teacher's lounge." And they looked at me, I was like, "I'm a teacher here. Like, I am 2 years old. Don't worry.
I'm allowed to enter the building whenever I want. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I looked like I was 33 whenever I was 18. So like. I remember the first time I bought a drink and my wife is like, "You didn't even get carded." Yeah, that's not surprising. Look at me. So I think that does it. I mean, we're going to start coming up to the maximum if we're not careful. So unless there's anything else, I mean, it was a great conversation, and I think that we got some new resources to look up. Thank you, by the way.
Thank you.
And I think we actually paid attention to what we were supposed to, which
that's always good.
Point.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, Mallory, one question.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you know Bree Lewis?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was a strength coach at Pittsburgh State for 2 years, and so I worked with Bree for the past 2 years.
Nice.
And I know she's from Topeka, and I remember her saying Seaman High School, and I figured you guys are about the same age.
Yeah, she's a couple years older than me, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
Yep.
she's a tall drink of water.
Oh, very much so. Very much.
Like I'm 6'3", and she makes me look tiny.
6'5". Like
Yeah,
solid 6'5". I mean,
she's a tall girl.
she still has all the basketball records for blocks. Like, of course, duh. Like, who's gonna beat that?
You're going to pay for it at that point, aren't you?
I was like, in parentheses, never had to jump for one of them. just stand with your arm in the air.
Yeah, she's a big person.
So I will go ahead and turn off the recording. And